Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. We have a story to tell, one written in ash, in silence, in the hollow places where bread should be. This is Ashes and Bread, a journey through 10,000 years of hunger, not as numbers but as lives, as children, as hands reaching for a bowl that never came. What you're about to hear is not just history. It's survival, it's sorrow, and it's truth spoken in voices that were never meant to be forgotten. Stay with us. Let the silence speak. Let the past echo. Because famine was never just about food. It was about power, and who was allowed to live. You do not remember a time before hunger. It is not a memory, but a condition. Like gravity. Like thirst. It presses in on the body and etches stories into bones. Even in times of plenty, your ancestors heard it whisper from beneath the soil, felt it in the breath between seasons. And when it never came alone. Famine is not an event, it is a reckoning. It begins with the weather, perhaps. A heat too long held, a rain that never comes, or worse, that comes too late. Then the crops falter. The prices shift. The granaries close their mouths like fists. And you, whoever you are, whenever you are, begin to count each grain. Long before kings and empires, there were bellies. And behind every god etched into stone, every law carved into clay, there is a story about bread. Not wealth, not power, bread. Because starvation is older than writing. Because no one builds a city on an empty stomach. Because the first agriculture was not invention, it was desperation. The history of hunger is the history of us. Every grain threshed by hand, every ration issued beneath a dictator's gaze. Every line of refugees waiting in mud for a ladle's mercy. These are the chapters they didn't teach you in school. But they are written all the same. Written in brittle teeth. In sunken cheeks. In the silence left by those who did not endure. So let us begin, not in triumph, but in ache. Not with battles, but with mouths. Yours among them. Let the record show. This was always a fragile feast. And hunger, never far behind the knife. You are crouched in a hut made of reed and ash, on the banks of a swollen river that has not flooded in 2 seasons. There is a child beside you, and their ribs lift like scaffolding under the skin. You do not know the word famine, not yet, but you know the emptiness. You count the seeds you boiled yesterday. You count the ones you still have. You do not know if you will plant them or eat them. Thousands of years later, a scholar will excavate this place and mark it as a settlement in decline. They will catalogue your clay bowl and the charred lentil inside. They will write of changing climates and resource collapse. They will not write your name, but they will call it history. In Rome, they called it annona, grain supply, the artery of empire. To fail to feed the people was to invite riot. In China, during the Great Leap Forward, The granaries rotted from the inside while slogans declared abundance. To question the feast was treason. In Ireland, a fungus turned abundance into blight, and landlords turned suffering into silence. Famine is not natural. It is not just drought, or flood, or frost. It is made by systems, by hands, by choices, by greed. There is always enough to eat for someone. The question is, who starves so that others do not? You will walk these roads. You will watch a neighbor eat grass. You will see a mother sell her last blanket for flour, then the bowl, then her hair. You will survive, but you will not forget, because hunger makes its home inside you. It teaches you what cannot be taught, what is worth stealing for, what is worth burying, what it means to eat and still feel empty. Across 10,000 years, the ache does not change, only the faces, and the names we give to the absence of food, and the lies we tell about why it came. So we begin again, chapter to chapter, mouth to mouth, memory to myth, until the hunger that made us finally tells its full story. Let it begin. You have never known the forest as anything but a fading thing. Once, your people roamed it with spears of fire-hardened wood, chasing deer and shadow. But the animals have grown fewer, and the trees thinner. Now you sit beside a patch of earth you've scarred into order. A garden. A risk. You press your finger into the soil, drop a seed, and bury it with hope. You do not know the names of the things that will come. Not empire, not property, not drought. But you know the ache in your stomach. The way your child looks at you when the fire dies with no meat upon it. So you plant. You tend. You watch. And you wait. The first farmers were not kings. They were mothers with missing teeth. Sons who returned from the hunt with nothing. They were people who had no choice. The soil was a gamble. The harvest, a prayer. Sometimes the rains would come. Sometimes they would not. Sometimes the mice would find your stores, or the mold. But still you sowed, because starvation waits for no excuse. The village is a ring of ash and reeds. There are 5 other gardens now. You no longer chase deer. You chase time, sunlight, moisture, yield. There is talk of building a wall, of guarding the stores. You did not need walls when you had nothing to guard. Now you do. Now you have grain, and grain will change everything. It will change your sleep. It will change your gods. You begin to dream of seasons instead of days. You begin to count, to weigh, to store. You invent words for hunger that comes not from the day but the year. You build ovens. You dig pits. You burn forests to make way for more soil. And slowly, terribly, you forget how to survive without the grain. The children no longer know how to follow hoofprints. You trade stories of the old ways, like ghost tales. You begin to believe that farming is life itself, but it is not. It is a tightrope above death. And every year, you walk it. Sometimes you fall. And there is no net below. Archaeologists will one day marvel at Çatalhöyük. They will call it a proto-city. They will speak of storage bins and sickle blades, and miss the story written in the layers of ashen seed, that the people here chose a fragile certainty over a wild unknown. That hunger made them settle. That fear made them stay. They will find skeletons with stunted limbs, brittle bones. They will write of malnutrition. They will not write of the frost that came too early, of the harvest that rotted on the stalk, of the infant buried with a bracelet made of baked grain, an offering or a plea. They will see it all as progress. But you know better. You were there. You felt the trade, freedom for bread. Your hands are cracked with cold. Your knees ache from kneeling in rows. But today, the harvest came in. You sing a song into the wind. It is not a song of triumph. It is a lullaby to keep the hunger quiet one more night. The grain lies in your basket. The fire waits in your hearth. And tomorrow, you will plant again, because there is no other way. Across the valleys, others are doing the same. Digging, burning, sowing. They do not know your name, but they know your struggle. From the Yellow River to the Nile, from the Tigris to the Danube, the same cycle begins. Grain, fire, hope, and always, always the waiting. Because the seed is never a promise, only a chance. And chance now is all we have. You were born to the rhythm of the river. The Nile does not ask your permission to rise or fall. It is the vein of the world, your world, and each year it is supposed to swell, to flood the fields, to leave behind the gift of black silt. That silt is bread. That silt is life. And when it fails, you pray harder. The priests say the gods are angry, that Ma'at, the balance of things, has been disturbed. They burn incense and spill wine. They read the stars. They consult the entrails of a bird, slit open and steaming. You watch your father shake his head behind their backs. He does not believe in birds. He believes in mud, and the mud is dust. The river has not risen. 2 years now. You count the cracked furrows in the ground where barley should have stood. At night, you hear the sound of jackals nearer than they should be. The cows are thin. Your mother boils reeds and calls it stew. She does not look you in the eye. And your little sister has stopped asking questions. In Memphis, the officials open the granaries. They weigh out rations in silence. They say, there is enough. They say this drought is temporary. They say the harvest next year will be better. They always say that. They do not say who decides who eats or who dies. You walk with your father along the river. You pass the fields where men once sang while planting. Now the stalks are brittle like old paper. He points at the high water marks on the stone. This was the measure. This was the sign. And it lies 3 cubits too low. The gods did not answer, or the men who claimed to speak for them lied. Farther south, the Nubian villages are empty. Some have fled into the desert. Some have died in place. The tax collectors come anyway. They carry ledgers and lashes. They ask for grain that does not exist. And when it does not come, they take goats, or daughters, or silence. The pharaoh sends emissaries to the temple. The temple sends back scrolls and omens. None of them send bread. Your uncle is caught hiding a sack of wheat behind a false wall. They beat him in the square. He does not cry out. He dies 3 days later, and no one buries him. There is no time. In the 5th year, the famine breaks the city. Memphis is no longer orderly. The granaries are guarded by men with knives. You hear the screams at night. You hear the lies in the morning. The pharaoh has not been seen in weeks. The priests say he communes with Ra. You think he hides? Even the gods cannot feed the hungry. You are 15 now. You have seen more funerals than births. Your hands are blistered from grinding bark into paste. Your mother eats only after you and your sister have eaten, and sometimes she does not eat at all. You do not ask her why. You know. It is the same reason she cuts the bread thinner each day. The same reason she sold her wedding beads. To keep mad. To pretend there is still order. When the rains finally come, they come all at once. A storm rises from the south like a fist unclenching. The flood bursts its banks and drowns the dead and living alike. You stand in the doorway of your hut and watch the water swallow the past. You are supposed to be grateful. You are supposed to sing. But all you feel is tired, because the flood is not a gift. It is a reprieve, and you know it will not last. The scribes will one day copy these years into papyrus scrolls. They will mark them as the time of failing Nile, of divine unrest. They will name kings and priests and tides. They will not name you, but your bones will lie beneath the silt, and the next harvest will rise from the field where your sister once played. And so it goes. Bread, blood, water, and the silence that follows. Not every famine comes from the gods. Some come from men. You will learn that soon, because the tax still comes, even when the river does not. And hunger, once born, does not die. It waits. You are Roman. That means you eat. Not like the Gauls, tearing meat with their hands beside smoky fires. Not like the Greeks, with their olives and fish guts and wine diluted like weak blood. You eat bread. You eat oil. You eat because the state feeds you. It is the pact between power and people, panem et circenses, bread and games. You do not vote. You do not rule. But the grain arrives. Or it should. And if it does not, Rome burns. The annona is not a policy. It is a lifeline. Every day, ships groan into the port at Ostia. Grain from Egypt. Grain from Sicily. Grain from Africa Proconsularis. You have never seen these places, but their soil is in your bread, and your peace is in their yield. At the forum, you line up with the others, your tessera in hand, a little token carved with your right to eat. The crowd murmurs like stirred ashes. A rumor spreads that the last convoy was lost to pirates. Another that a storm scattered the fleet. You feel the weight in your stomach before the hunger even begins. Memory masquerading as present pain. There are riots when the ships are late. There are riots when the bread is short. One prefect had his house burned to the foundation. Another was dragged through the streets in a grain sack. The mob does not need a reason. The mob needs bread. You remember the winter they cut the ration in half. Your brother stood in line for 5 hours. Your mother wept over a crust. The dog disappeared. No one spoke of it. The neighbors just stopped asking. You told yourself it was temporary. But the cold does not care about promises. Nor does the stomach. In the Senate, they speak of logistics, of grain quotas and naval escorts. They do not speak of children chewing leather sandals. They do not speak of the baker who hanged himself when his flour ran out. They do not speak of you. But they fear you, because if the bread fails, so does the illusion that Rome is eternal, that Caesar is a god, that the poor are content. The grain must flow, because the truth is brittle, because empire is not built on stone. It is built on rations. Across the sea, in Alexandria, men drown loading the ships. Their names are not recorded. Their deaths are not mourned. But the convoy arrives, and the ovens in Trastevere blaze anew. And for one more day, the lie holds. Rome is fed. You bite into the bread and taste Africa. You bite into the crust and hear the lash. You do not think of the farmer who starved to meet his quota. You do not think of the legion that emptied the storehouses of a province. You are grateful, and shamefully so, because gratitude is a luxury, and tomorrow is never promised. The emperors know this. They fear the baker's rebellion more than the barbarian's sword. They fear silence in the Subura more than noise at the border, because empty stomachs do not stay quiet. And revolutions begin not with ideas, but with hunger. You sleep with a sack of millet under your bed. You do not tell anyone. It is your insurance, your prayer, your betrayal, because one day the convoy will not come, and you will have to choose who to feed, who to let go. They will call it civilization. They will call it grandeur. But you know it is just another market, another measure, and the price is always the same. Someone must starve for Rome to feast. You were born into a village with no name worth remembering, a thatch-roofed smear along a road that leads nowhere important. The priest calls this the year of our Lord 1315. You call it the year the sun forgot. It rained in April, then May, then June. The river that once fed the mill swallowed it whole. The roads turned to soup, the fields to rot, the seeds drowned before they had the chance to fail. Your father stands at the edge of the barley field, his hands slack, his mouth open. You have never seen him frightened. You do not recognize him now. You do not know what hunger looks like yet, but you will. Soon. By July, the stores are empty. The spring's bread is gone, and there is no harvest to come. The cows slip and die in the muck. The pigs eat their own young. Your mother feeds you a broth that tastes like grass and regret. She says, it is only until the weather turns. But the weather does not turn. You try to pray, but the words feel hollow, like the bell tower the lightning struck last month. The priest says, God tests the faithful, that this is the hunger of Job. But when his pantry runs dry, he rides east and does not return. You begin to test God in return. The villagers speak in whispers now, about the boy found in the woods with his belly opened, about the baker who mixed bark into flour, about the old woman who eats moss and curses at the sun. These are not stories. These are preparations. The world is coming apart, not in fire but in mud. You wake one night to your sister weeping. She is dreaming of bread. You know because she is chewing in her sleep. You hold her, and her body is so light it frightens you. You do not tell your parents. They are already breaking. The dead are buried shallow. There is no dry earth. The grave digger drinks. The lord of the manor has stopped collecting rents, but not out of kindness. There is nothing left to take. He locks the granary. He posts guards. He eats. You do not. By winter, your village is bones and coughing. You eat the leather of your boots. You eat rats. You eat hope in small, bitter bites. Your mother dies before Christmas. Your father follows her into the ground before the thaw. You are 13. Your sister is 9. And you are no longer children. You walk south with what remains. Not just food, but names, songs, bits of old warmth. Other villages are worse. A man tries to trade his daughter for a bowl of oats. You do not look her in the eye. You are afraid of what you might say. In the town of Winchester, you steal for the first time a crust from a merchant's stall. You run. You are beaten. But you eat, and that is all that matters. Morality is a luxury. Food is survival. The famine will last 2 more years. It will kill 1 in every 10. Maybe more. But there will be no songs. No monuments. Only weathered bones beneath drowned furrows. And a church that says it was all part of God's plan. You do not believe them. You never will. When the rains finally stop, the sun feels like a lie. The fields are quiet. The hunger is quieter. But it still lives inside you. It has changed your name, your shape, your soul. You will live. But you will never be full again. Not truly. Not in the way children are, before they learn the taste of ash and grief. They will call it the Great Famine, as if that word great can hold what was lost. But you know better. You were there. You remember the sound of the rain that would not end. You remember the silence that followed. You were born under a red sky. The monsoon came late. The wind brought dust, not rain. Your mother said the gods were watching. You learned, too young, that the gods often watch and do nothing. The Mughal emperor sits on a jeweled throne in Agra. His beard is oiled. His court sings poetry. His taxmen ride hard across cracked soil, demanding grain that no longer grows. You have never seen him, but your hunger has. The village elder gathers you all beneath the neem tree. He reads the decree. Every farmer must render a fifth of his yield, even if there is no yield, even if the well is dry and the seedlings wither in their sleep, even if you ate the seed rice last month, especially then. Your father bows before the collector. Your mother sells her bracelets. Your uncle digs a pit and hides a sack of lentils beneath a false floor. A neighbor betrays him. By nightfall, the house is ash. The lentils burn. The betrayal does not. The famine spreads like rumor, quiet at first, then loud. The river recedes. The jackals return. The fields bloom with weeds and silence. Your baby brother dies in his sleep. No one wraps him. The cloth is needed for barter. You go to the city, barefoot and brittle. The roads are clogged with the living and the nearly not. You see a man chewing dirt, his lips bleeding red. You see a woman cradling a pot she pretends holds food. You learn not to look too closely, and not to look away. The city gates close at dusk. The guards beat those who beg. Inside, the grain market bustles. Gold for wheat, silver for millet. Your sister offers her earrings. The merchant laughs. You offer your labor. The merchant does not laugh. He sends you to carry sacks. You pass out in the sun. You are not paid. In the palace, they still dine on lamb. In the palace, rose water sweetens the air. You can smell it, faintly, when the wind is right. It makes you want to scream. You do not. Your mouth is too dry. You have not wept in days. You cannot spare the water. A preacher in the square says this is karma, that you are paying the price of past lives. You wonder if you were a tyrant before. If your sins were coins, how many did you spend to earn this fate? You do not believe him. You believe in the heat. You believe in the emptiness. You believe in the ache. When the riots come, they are not righteous. They are desperate. You throw stones. You light fires. You break open a storeroom and find rats have beaten you to it. Still, you eat. You gag. You eat again. And you thank no one. The famine will pass. It always does. But it will leave its mark. Your spine will curve from early labor. Your teeth will rot from chewing husks. Your soul will grow quiet. You will never again believe a full plate is normal. You will always eat fast. And you will always save the last bite. Historians will write of the Mughal Golden Age. They will speak of gardens and domes and calligraphy. They will not speak of the child who died clutching a rice stalk carved from wood. They will not speak of the field-turned graveyard. But you will remember, because history is written by the full and lived by the hungry. You are inside Munster. It is 1,400 534, and God has come home. That's what they said. That's what you said, when it was safer to believe than to starve. Jan Mathis, the prophet from the Netherlands, arrived in sandals and flame. He spoke of the last days, of purifying fire, of a new Jerusalem to rise here in mud and mortar. He banned money. He ordered the burning of all books except the Bible. He declared himself Enoch reborn, and then he rationed the bread. No one argued. Not loudly. Not yet. When the Prince-Bishop Franz von Waldeck surrounded the city, Mathis did not fear. He heard God's voice. He was told that Easter would bring deliverance. So, on Easter Sunday, he rode out on horseback with 12 men, cloaked in white, proclaiming judgment. You stood at the gate and watched them vanish into enemy lines. You heard the screams. You saw the pike. And later, his severed head nailed to the city gate, his genitals strung up beside it. The people wept. Jan van Leyden smiled. The tailor-turned-king claimed he would carry on the vision. But what he built was not a kingdom. It was a stage. He declared himself King of the New Zion. He wore golden robes as famine hollowed his followers. He took 16 wives, then more. When one wife questioned him, publicly, bravely, he beheaded her in the square with his own hands. You watched. You did not speak. You were afraid of what he would take next. You remember the blacksmith. He doubted aloud. He said, the king was no king. He said, a prophet who starves his people is no mouth of God. So Jan made a lesson of him. They tore out his tongue. They dragged him through the square with red-hot tongs, tearing flesh in rhythm, limb by limb. The screams lasted hours. The silence afterward lasted longer. Food vanished. Faith became ash. The king hosted banquets of empty bowls. He made children dance in the market with spoons. You saw people chew cobblestones, pretending it was bread. You heard them whisper, Amen, with blood on their lips, because hunger under God was still better than death under Rome. One day, a group of elderly and sick were allowed to leave the city. You cheered at first. Less mouths, a chance. But the prince's army would not take them, and the city would not let them return. So you watched them starve in the no-man's land, slumped between walls, day by day, like rotting boundary stones. No one spoke. No one dared. The siege dragged on. One night, the mercenaries attacked at sundown, drunk and shouting, believing it was dawn. They were repelled. The city celebrated, but the ovens remained cold, and victory tasted like boiled bark. In 1535, Munster fell. A traitor opened the gate. The prophet king was dragged from his throne in the cathedral. Bernard Knipperdolling and Bernard Krechting, his lieutenants, were taken too. You watched from a cellar as the kingdom collapsed in smoke and butchered song. They were not executed quickly. For an hour, the 3 men were tortured with red-hot tongs, their skin peeled in strips in the same square where they once preached righteousness. When it ended, their bodies were hoisted in iron cages to the top of St. Lambert's Church. The crows came. The wind stripped them bare, and still the cages hung. They hang there now. They say Munster was madness, a warning, a fever dream. But you were there. You saw what happens when prophecy promises food and delivers chains. You remember the child chewing stones. You remember the blacksmith's scream. And you know what a kingdom built on hunger truly looks like. You begin as a witness, a boy with dough on his fingers and soot in his lungs. The bread line stretches past the bakery door, longer each morning, thinner each face. They do not curse anymore. They wait. Waiting is sharper than anger. The 5th of October, 1789. It starts with the women. They gather at the market before sunrise, fishwives, mothers, butchers' daughters. They shout not for blood, but for flour. You hear it in your bones. Ah, Versailles. The cry is not a whisper. It is a storm. They march through rain. They carry knives, broomsticks, muskets. They carry hunger. You follow behind with the other boys. Not out of courage, out of need. At Versailles, the palace gates loom too gold to be real. The women beat them with spoons. The guards raise muskets. There's a scream, a shot, and then the gate opens like a broken jaw. You don't see the Queen. Only the bedroom door splintered by bayonets. Only the guards' heads on pikes. Only a smear of blood across marble that no one cleans. You taste iron. You think it is the rain. It is not. The king returns to Paris, surrounded by bread carts. His carriage creaks like a coffin. The people cheer. Then they spit. Then they cheer again. They do not know what they want, but they know they are hungry. Years pass in slogans. You become a man inside the revolution. You see neighbors renamed. You see churches stripped bare. You see the baker's son denounce his own father. You learn to speak carefully. You learn to nod. You learn to march. The 21st of January, 1793. Place de la Révolution. The king stands atop the scaffold, wrapped in a white shirt. He tries to speak. They ring the drums louder. They do not want to hear him. You are close enough to see his breath in the cold. You are close enough to hear the blade drop. It sounds like nothing. The sound is the crowd, not the killing. They lift his head. The crowd roars. You do not. You look at the blood pooling in the sawdust. And you wonder if this will feed the people, if any death can. The 16th of October, same year. Marie Antoinette rides to her death in a peasant's cart. Hair cut short. Dress faded. She does not beg. She does not cry. You line the street. You do not cheer. You think of the bread you could not afford. You think of the hunger in your sister's bones. And still, you wonder if this too is just theatre. The blade falls again. There is no thunder this time. Only the creak of the cart as it rolls away. The people disperse. Nothing has changed. The bread is still dear. The oven still cold. But something has been spent. You feel it in your spine. The crown is broken, and the hunger remains. They will say the revolution was for liberty. They will name streets after heroes. But you remember the blood on the baker's stoop, the children fed on boiled cloth, the king's eyes as he searched the crowd, the silence after the blade, and the question that never leaves: was this what bread was worth? You wake to the smell of rot. It's not the cows. There are no cows left. It's not the fields. They're too empty to stink. It's the potatoes. The ones in the ground, blackened from the inside out. Soft, wet, dead. You dig anyway. The blight came early this year. It always does now. You know its touch before you see it. The curl of the leaf, the whisper in the stalk. It turns life to slime overnight. Still, you plant. Still, you dig. Still, you hope. Because what else is there? Your father sold the horse last year. Your mother's rings the year before. Now it's just you and your brother, thin as kindling, and a patch of earth that gives nothing. Not anymore. You walk 5 miles to a relief station. They hand you soup that tastes of salt and nothing. The priest watches. He asks if you'll take the Protestant book. He asks if you'll change your name for another bowl. You do not answer. You take the soup. You hate yourself for it. At night, the firewood runs out. Your brother coughs until morning. You chew on a belt. Your teeth leave no mark. You boil grass. You eat moss from a rock. You say grace for it. You do not know why. Ships still leave the harbor. Full. Grain. Oats. Beef. Barrels of butter. You see them loaded by men with pink faces and brass buttons. They don't look at you. You don't bother looking back. The landlord's agent posts a notice. You cannot read it, but you know what it means. He rides with soldiers. They light the thatch before they speak. Your father goes back for the bucket. He doesn't come out. The soldiers laugh. Your brother pulls you into the hedge. You watch your home vanish in smoke. You don't cry. Not because you're strong, because you're dry. You try for the workhouse. The gates are closed. They say it's full. They say come back next week. You sleep in a ditch. You wake to frost on your lips. You feel your mother's hand, but it's yours. They let some go. Too old. Too slow. Too many. A priest begs the soldiers to take them. They refuse. The city won't take them back either. So you watch from the hedge as they lie in the mud between 2 refusals. A child dies beside a stone wall. You name her in your mind. She didn't have one. By spring, your brother is gone. You carry him as far as you can. You dig a hole with a spoon. It is too shallow. You cover him anyway. You mark it with a broken bowl. You whisper something. It might be a name. It might be goodbye. You don't remember. They will call this famine. They will call it tragedy. They will not call it theft. They will not call it murder. But you will. You lived it. You saw the grain leave. You saw the meat leave. You saw the empty hands. You felt the cold earth in your nails, and the hunger in your spine that never left. You grow old. You survive. You move across the sea. You work. You forget some things, but not all. Not the blackened field. Not the shallow grave. Not the ships that fed the empire and left your mother to starve. You were born to sow. You know the shape of the earth like a hymn. You do not need a clock to know when to reap. But this year, you reap nothing. The fields are full, but the grain is not yours. It is the state's, and the state has teeth. They come before the harvest, men with rifles and pens. They take the wheat. They take the seed. They take the ledger with your name and write, fulfilled. You ask what that means. They say, your quota is met. You look at your daughter's empty bowl. You do not ask again. Your wife hides a handful of rye in a sack beneath the bed. You pray no one saw, but someone always sees. The next morning, the house is broken open. They take the sack. They spit on your door. They leave you alive. You understand this is punishment. The posters say bread for the people. The radio says the village prospers. The children say nothing. Their mouths are too dry. You feed your son boiled leather. He chews and says thank you. Then he stops speaking altogether. You go to the city, to Kharkiv. It is spring, 1933. You walk 50 kilometers beside others whose legs move by memory, not strength. At the edge of the city, a line of guards blocks the road. They say peasants are not allowed. You say you need food. They laugh. You do not try again. Inside the city, the billboards are bright. Red stars. Golden wheat. A smiling farmer holds a bushel too large to be real. Children wave flags. There is music from a loudspeaker. You turn your face away, not from anger, from shame. People collapse in the streets. They are swept into carts. You see a boy sucking clay, a girl licking chalk. You see a man steal a dead dog from a pile. He cries when it's gone. You do not judge him. Your wife dies quietly. You bury her behind the barn. The earth is frozen, but not as hard as your hands. You do not mark the grave. There is nothing left to mark it with. The trains pass in the night. You can hear them from your cot, carrying grain to Moscow, to export, to glory. You think of your son's ribs, and how they rose like questions. You never answered them. They call it policy. You call it Holodomor. Death by hunger. Death by decree. A famine without drought. A harvest without mercy. You do not know the word genocide, but you know what it tastes like. Years later, they will say it never happened, that the numbers are wrong, that the deaths were natural, but you remember the child who died chewing his bootlace. You remember the spoonful of flour you traded for a coat. You remember the snow that covered your daughter's face before you could. And you know, you were born into wind. Flat sky. Red dirt. A house built from boards that already knew failure. Your father said the rain would come. It didn't. Your mother said the crops would forgive. They didn't. You said nothing. You learned to chew quiet. The wheat turned brittle. The corn shriveled at the root. The cattle starved on their feet. Then came the dust. Not in gusts, but in waves. Black walls. Rolling tombs. You stood at the door and watched the world try to bury you alive. You woke with grit in your teeth. You found your brother with mud in his lungs. He coughed until his ribs cracked. The doctor came once, then never again. The banks came next, took the tractor, took the land, left a pink notice nailed to the door like a wound. Your father folded it into his pocket. You never saw it again, but you saw what it did to him. He stopped talking to the field after that. The radio spoke of California, of fruit so heavy it broke the trees, of jobs that waited for anyone with two hands. So you packed what dust didn't claim. 3 chairs, a pot, a photograph of your grandmother smiling in a field that doesn't exist anymore. Then you left, west, into promise. The car broke near Gallup. You pushed. The baby cried. The wind stayed with you the whole way. Dust in the seats. Dust in the bread. Dust in your prayers. You reached the valley. Green. Too green. Like it was mocking you. You reached the labor line. And there they were. Hundreds of you. Each one hungry. Each one desperate. 1 job for 10 mouths. $1 for a day, unless someone offered 50 cents. They always did. You lived in a tent made from potato sacks. You picked peaches with bloodied hands. You watched men fight over spoiled meat. You watched women trade their names for sugar. You listened as a man from Arkansas was shot for asking about fair pay. He didn't ask again. The sheriff called you Okie, like it was filth. He said, keep moving. He said, there's no work here. You said nothing. Your mother wept into her dress. You pretended not to hear. At night, the children asked when the good part would start. You told them stories of rain, of full tables, of wind that smelled like wheat, not ash. You lied beautifully, because someone had to. They will write about the Dust Bowl as an environmental disaster. They will mention erosion. They will blame the plow. But you remember the silence after the storm. You remember the price of a crust. You remember standing in a green field that would not feed you, and how hunger does not care what side of the state line you're on. You were 12 when the war ended. You thought that meant the hunger would stop. It didn't. It got worse. Berlin smells like rot. Not just the buildings, the people. Bodies in stairwells. Mothers in rags. Children picking through ash with bare fingers, looking for something they don't have a name for. The Soviets patrol your side of the city. You call them Ivan when you're out of earshot. They laugh with their mouths and stare with their stomachs. They take what's left. Beds, watches, daughters. Your sister never talks about what happened. She just doesn't look at men anymore. The food coupons don't come often. When they do, it's for flour made of sawdust. Bread that crumbles like chalk. You hear of people boiling wallpaper. You try it. It tastes like old paint. You eat it anyway. You dream of potatoes and wake up chewing the edge of a curtain. A boy you know licked mortar off a wall. He said it had salt. He died a week later. They buried him in a crate meant for apples. In the West, they put the soldiers in fields. No tents. No barracks. Just wire. The Rheinwiesenlager. You heard the name once and couldn't forget it. The Americans called them disarmed enemy forces, not prisoners. So they didn't have to feed them. Some starved. Some froze. Some ate grass until their stomachs split. A man in your building said 1 million never came home. No one argued. What was there to argue with? The crows? The mud? The silence? You steal from a Red Army truck once. A turnip. Raw. Cold. The guard sees you. He doesn't shoot. He just laughs. You think that's worse. Your father never came back. Captured in the West. Rumors say the Americans turned over some prisoners to the French. The French used them in the mines. They were never seen again. Your mother keeps his shoes by the door, just in case. But she stopped dusting them. The city is divided now. Lines on maps. Checkpoints. Barrels with flames where men gather to warm their hands and pretend they're not begging. Sometimes American soldiers throw candy to the children. Sometimes they throw nothing. You wave anyway, because it's what you're supposed to do now. The adults say you must never talk about the past, that Germany must become clean. You try. You scrub yourself raw in the bathwater you share with 4 other families. You still smell like ash, like bread that never baked. You walk past a field where a soldier lies. No uniform, no grave, just a shape in the grass. Someone has taken his boots. No one stops. No one prays. He is not a martyr. He is not a hero. He is not even a memory. He is just hunger, forgotten by both sides. They call these the Hunger Jahre, the Hunger Years. They blame the war. They blame the blockade. They blame what cannot speak. But you remember. You remember the wallpaper, the laughter of guards, the ration card that promised 1,500 calories and delivered 400, the silence where your father used to be. The famine did not begin with drought. It began with distance, with the Soviet Union collapsing in winter, with Moscow no longer sending oil, or wheat, or hope. You didn't know what the flag looked like, but you felt its fall in your stomach. The lights dimmed first, then the factories, then the trains, then the mouths. The loudspeakers kept working. They said, "We have nothing to envy." They said, "We shall eat the roots of the mountains before we bow." You believed them, until the roots ran out. You worked at a textile mill that hadn't spun thread in months. Every morning, You lined up for roll call. Not to produce, to be seen. To be counted. To be watched. Because absence is a kind of guilt. And guilt is hunger's twin. Your father made soup from boiled leaves and flour swept from cracks. Sometimes rats, sometimes bark. You learn not to ask. You learn to eat with your eyes closed, to chew like it was an act of worship. Your uncle tried to sell radios on the black market. He disappeared. Your cousin traded for corn with a foreigner. She was arrested for espionage. You don't know where she is now. No one does. No one asks. Because questions are fatal. You hear of people eating sawdust pressed into cakes, children collapsing in schoolyards, work teams burying 3 bodies before noon, and still the newspapers say, harvest strong, morale high. You see photos of the dear leader feeding the army. You wonder where that rice came from. You wonder if it was yours. The border with China is a rumor, a river thin enough to step over. So one night, your mother takes your hand and says only, walk. You walk in silence, through trees, through mud, through fear. The guards are not looking, or maybe they are, but not at you. In Yambian, you eat a bowl of rice and cry, not from joy, from pain, because your body forgot what full feels like. They call you a defector. You don't know what that means. You only know they want you gone. They say you are a mouth without a passport. You believe them. You return to the river one winter. You see a woman cross with a child on her back. The ice gives. Only one rises. Neither scream. You stay until the water stills. You do not pray. There is no language left that fits this grief. They call it the arduous march. They name it like a poem, like a noble struggle. But you remember the roots, the silence, the ration cards without rations, the electricity without power, the soldiers with food, and the rest with nothing. They will say the famine was hidden, that they did not know, that it was a tragedy of policy, not cruelty. But you know, you were there. You watched a superpower vanish and take your bread with it. You chewed bark under the face of a man who told you to smile. You crossed a river and left your name behind. And you remember, because remembering is all that's left. You are alive. That makes you lucky. You have never watched your child die for lack of bread. You have never bartered your body for a bowl of rice. You have never scraped mold off a wall and called it food. But the hunger is still there, not in your belly, in the system. There are more people alive today than have ever lived before. The fields are vast. The factories hum. The supply chains stretch from sea to shining sea. And still, 1 in every 9 goes to bed empty. Still, the shelves overflow in one place and rot in another. Still, we waste enough food to feed a ghost nation. You scroll through images. A child in Yemen, with eyes too old for his face. A woman in Venezuela, trading her necklace for flour. A man in Sudan, praying for rain that never comes. You double tap. You swipe. You feel bad. Then you order takeout. The world moves on. But the hunger doesn't. We call it food insecurity. As if the stomach were a spreadsheet. As if hunger were a mistake, not a choice. Not the outcome of markets and wars and borders drawn with blood. We say the earth can feed 10 billion. It can. It doesn't. In refugee camps, ration lines stretch like scars. In megacities, the poor live above trash piles and beneath towers. In climate zones pushed to breaking, crops fail year after year. Flood, drought, blight, war, greed, again and again. And always, it is the poor who pay the price. You cannot taste hunger through statistics, but you can see it in the girl who flinches when her lunch is late, in the boy who saves half his sandwich for dinner, in the mother who skips meals but never admits it, in the way we learn to hoard, to hide, to fear the future, because tomorrow has too many mouths, because the bread always runs out, because someone always starves. The question is never if, only who. You walk through a supermarket. The air is cool. The lights are bright. The music plays softly over pyramids of fruit and shrink-wrapped meat. You do not see the hands that picked this food. You do not see the lands stripped to grow it. You do not see the child who died the year the prices spiked. But they are there, in the margin, in the silence. You want to believe the famine is over. That we learned. That we changed. But the signs remain. They're just better hidden, behind buzzwords, behind policies, behind distance. And you wonder, when the next famine comes, will we call it something else? Will we pretend again? Or will we remember the fields of ash, the ration lines, the painted wheat, the girl with the cracked heels, the bones beneath the silt? Will we finally learn that hunger is not a failure of food, but a failure of will? You sit at a table. There is enough. You eat slowly. You do not waste. You think of those who came before and those who will come after. You chew and swallow and hold the silence gently, like bread in your hands. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you felt something, if the echoes of these voices stayed with you, we ask only this: like, subscribe, share the story. And if you'd like to go one step further to help us continue telling stories like this, the ones left out of textbooks, the ones carved in silence, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Every ear matters. Every voice remembered is a voice restored. And every one of you listening helps keep that memory alive. Thank you. Be warm tonight, and may your table never go empty.